Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special event tonight. Tonight's focus is about Vancouver Island, but we'll talk about all sorts of great fun things about outdoor recreation and safety. We'll kick off officially at about 7:02. We still have a few people that are rolling in. We've seen the numbers kind of just starting to get going there, so it's pretty exciting to see. I'm Sandra, by the way. I'm the Executive Director of the BC AdventureSmart program. I've been really fortunate to have been a part of the program for the last 17 years. That's how old we are. And before that, I was a park ranger and wore the same uniform that you'll see Jamie wearing tonight. And I did that for about 12 years before I had two little people who aren't so little anymore. My son is 23 and my daughter is 20. My time with AdventureSmart has been really fun for me. It's a passion, it's an interest, it's what I went to school for, outdoor rec management. And it's allowed me to work with so many awesome people, and that includes search and rescue, who we have joining us tonight, and affiliates like BC Parks, and it's a really exciting career to have that affiliation with those other players in the industry. So it's really exciting. There's been a few special events that we put on so far here, really to kick off summer. We want to kick off summer with you, for you, and bring these special guests on to share their insights. As some of you may know, we put on webinars every week, every Thursday. We go through our curriculum from our children's program to the Paddle Smart program to our Survive Outside program, and in the winter, snow safety, backcountry, and within the ski area. So we rotate through that every week. You can join us just the way you did tonight for here and learn a little bit more there as well. And so these special events here to kick off the seasons, we're going to do at the beginning of summer and the beginning of winter with special guests, inviting them to our virtual table to share with you what they have to say about outdoor rec, safety insights, respect for the land, and I'm excited to hear what our guests have to say tonight. I'm grateful to be joining you from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and I'm also grateful for our tech support tonight and our crew assistant coordinator, Natasha. She's in the background tonight taking care of the platform here. You're on GoToWebinar if this is new for you. You are muted right out of the gate, and your cameras are turned off, but you do have a way to communicate with us, and that's through the chat field, or pardon me, the questions. And Natasha will queue up your questions for our special guests, and we'll give you an opportunity to have those read out, and everyone can answer them. So anytime, throw that in there. Don't wait for the end of the speakers to toss your questions in there. Toss them in at any time. If they have a question about AdventureSmart, BC Parks, search and rescue, and outdoor rec, we're here to answer for you. So we're here till 8:30, so hopefully you're comfortable and you're ready to roll. I'd like to introduce our first guest, and his name is Jamie Godfrey. He's a senior ranger for the Strathcona area of BC Parks. He's also a member of Comox Valley Search and Rescue. Although he didn't have the opportunity to discover backcountry hiking until his early 20s, he quickly became an avid hiker and has been very lucky to hit trails in BC, Alberta, Yukon, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Mexico, and the US. He also enjoys touring on a splitboard, mountain biking, that's a love of mine as well, and most recently took up rock climbing. He's interested through his work as well in conservation, ecology, wilderness safety, and public education. So he is one of, those are all one of the reasons why we've chosen him to join us tonight. So Jamie, we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us, and over to you. Thanks for coming.
Hello, thank you, Sandra. I'm joining you from Courtney, which is the unceded territory of the Comox, Wiwakai, and Wiwakam First Nations, and I am very happy to be joining you all. I'm pretty stoked to see over 100 people in the audience here. Yeah, I think this is a super important topic for us to cover. So yeah, I'm glad to see the interest. So oh yeah, okay. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. I'm just gonna jump right into my presentation, and then I think there's gonna be a bit of time for questions after. Hopefully I'll get to hear from a lot of you. I imagine there'll be some burning questions about Strathcona and some of the stuff we talk about today. So I'll start sharing my screen and just get into it. Okay, Yeah, so there I am up on a mountain. Every day at work is just like that. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is what I call mastering safety in the backcountry. So yeah, as Sandra said, I work in Strathcona Park. It's kind of the prime hiking destination on the island. Maybe I'm biased, but that's what I think. It's got a lot of the big name hikes that people talk about a lot. So it's got the island's tallest peak in the Golden Hind. It's got the most technical climb in Colonel Foster. It's also got the most recognizable glacier on the island in the Comox Glacier. And it's got a ton of other like big name hikes, probably a lot of the ones that you'd see on social media. They're all in Strathcona. So I definitely encourage anyone and everyone who is watching this right now to get out there and check it out. There's a ton of gorgeous landscapes to be had. But before you do, I think there's a lot of important stuff you should know. I'm here talking at the invitation of AdventureSmart, which is a wonderful organization. They're very focused on backcountry safety, so that's what I'm going to be sort of focusing on as well. But you may notice that I touch a little bit as well on backcountry ethics, which is more about respecting the place you're in and the people who are around you who are also out there recreating, because I think those two are essential skills and knowledge for people to have before they head out there. So yeah, let's just jump into it. So I made that horrible pun on my title because I laid this out as if it's a master's program. So we're going to start with the basics, going to go from the 101 level, backcountry skills, through 201, and I'm going to touch on backcountry 301. So backcountry 101. Like anything, it's important to start with the basics. So a lot of things in life, it's kind of, there's something to be said for learning on the fly as you go. Backcountry travel probably is not one of those things, because if you make errors or you go in without the proper knowledge, you could wind up getting yourself into unsafe or uncomfortable conditions. Another thing I'm going to touch on a few times, I'm going to try and go back to it, is to find mentors in the community. So backcountry hiking is an incredible pastime. I love it. But it's one of those things that it's best shared with people. So, and especially as you're starting out, it's a really good thing to have people you can sort of bounce ideas off. You can share gear, you can try different things, because there's a million ways to do it. So finding people who can help you learn the skills or you can learn them with is super valuable. Another thing I like to remind people is that hiking is something you can do until late in life, so you don't need to rush it. I'm patrolling the park all the time, and I often run into people that are like well into their 70s who could out hike probably a lot of us in this audience. So I find I really like when I meet those folks because it really does put it in perspective. I have all these like lofty goals of hikes I want to do, and it's easy to feel like you're not progressing in your skills fast enough, like especially when you get into the aspect of mountaineering and that sort of thing. But yeah, you have decades to do this pastime, so it's best to take the time when you're starting out to learn it, how to do it right. So backcountry 101, here we go. So baby steps is how you should start. And for these first skills and when you're starting to learn backcountry travel, it's best to choose trails that are well traveled, well signed, not too difficult, and they're repeatable. So in Strathcona specifically, we have the trails that are accessed from Mount Washington area. That's called the Forbidden Plateau or the Paradise Meadows area. You'll hear it referred to as both. It's kind of confusing because there's also another area that's connected to that, but it's a completely different trailhead that people call Forbidden Plateau. So sometimes we like to refer to this area as Paradise Meadows. Another area is Elk River Trail. That's up to the second campsite. That's a good sort of beginner level trail, and that's where you can start putting in your overnights and stuff like that. And then we've also got a lot of day use trails in the Butter Lake corridor, so like Upper Myra Falls, Cars Creek Loop, those sorts of trails. But I'm going to revisit some of the traits that I'm talking about for the trails that you want to look out for when you're starting out. So well traveled is pretty self-explanatory. If something goes wrong, you want to increase the chance of someone coming across you to help you out. You want it to be well signed. So up in this Paradise Meadows area of the park, there's signs at pretty much every junction. There's map signs at a lot of the major ones. So that's super helpful for you to know where you are within the trail system. You don't want it to be too difficult, because if it's too hard, you might end up hating hiking after your first hike. And then repeatable, what I'm trying to say there is that you want to pick a destination that's kind of close to your house, easy to access, so that you can go to it in lots of different conditions. So if it's hot and sunny for a week, or if it's pouring rain, or you do it in the winter when the days are really short versus the summer, the days are really long, what do all those factors, how do they start to affect your experience of that terrain? Those are the sorts of things that you want to be thinking about as you're traveling through backcountry environments, because that's all sort of building that knowledge base that you can use. You can sort of translate it from your area that you're really specifically knowledgeable about. You can sort of use your knowledge from that area to fill in gaps and when you go into areas that you don't know as well. So some of the skills to practice on those beginner trails, navigation, that's pretty basic skill, and I think it's very important to start with the map and compass. These are skills that are often overlooked because of the access that we all have to like the cool shiny technology, all the apps on your cell phones or GPS. And one of the common things you'll hear people say about map and compass is that there's no batteries, so you can't, and there's no service. So that's a benefit to it, obviously. But one of the things that at least I don't hear as much, but I think is equally, if not more important, is that using a map and compass helps foster a better understanding of the landscape. Because when you're looking at a topo map and trying to figure out where you are, you have to pick out landmarks. And if you can't read the landscape, then you can't figure out where you are on a map. So how do you start doing that? That's it's more than I can explain in this little presentation here, but luckily we have the internet at our fingertips. So you can go onto YouTube. I don't know if this PowerPoint will be sent, probably not, I imagine, but the specific video doesn't matter. If you just search on YouTube, like map and compass, navigation, how to, some combination of those words, you'll probably find something that's helpful. But basically what you want to do, you want to find a video that seems good, maybe watch a couple and sort of pick out the commonalities on like the very specific how-tos. But once you have that sort of knowledge, then you take that out to those easier trails and you pick a destination, you have your map, and then you just walk to that destination and periodically stop, try and figure out where you are using the landmarks around you. And then you'll probably have a phone with you as well, and you can use that to sort of double check your location. Another thing, when we're talking about navigating, something you don't hear as much is picking landmarks and observing the trail both in front of you as you're heading up, but also behind you. So what you're trying to do is sort of leave yourself like a breadcrumb trail basically in your head of what you've seen. And so when you're coming back down, you want to sort of pick out things. Like for me, I like plants, so like I'll find a tree that's growing weird, or I'll find a little patch of flowers. And I just sort of, it's not really a conscious thing, but I just like notice things as I'm going, and every now and then I'll turn and look behind me to see what it looks like when I'm coming back down the trail. And then so as you're coming back, you'll recognize things, and that sort of clues you in that you're on the right track. And it's especially like when you're at junctions or changes in landscape, stuff like that, that's where you want to see, okay, what does this look like coming back down the trail, because you don't want to miss that junction. And one of the trails in the park, Albert Edwards, that's a big thing where people get lost. They miss the trail junction on the way back down. So I'm just going to grab some water here. But it's important when you're practicing these navigation skills, it's important. You don't have to be an expert or anything, but you do want to be able to rely on your skills somewhat in case something goes wrong. I don't have this memorized, so you'll hear some paper. Okay, skills practice, navigation. To be honest, 90% of the time I'm going to be using my smartphone really to navigate, but that I'm comfortable doing that because I have that base level of skills that I use, or that I learned on a map and compass, which is reading the landscape. So oftentimes I'm sort of navigating the whole time I'm on a hike, and I'll use my phone just to sort of check that I am where I think I am. So the pros of the navigation with technology, is that it's easy, it's user-friendly, and it's precise. GPS is often accurate to within 8 to 10 meters. Cons, I feel like I've hammered this home enough, but it doesn't foster a great understanding of the landscape. So it's easy when you're using a phone. You just, like, often base maps will have the trails on them, and so you're just like a dot moving along a trail. It doesn't matter what's around you. You can just look at the dot and say, okay, I'm 2 kilometers from where I want to be. And when your phone dies, or when you forget to download a base map and then you lose service, you don't have any of the skills to sort of take off the phone. So yeah, they can be unreliable. Another thing, if you're going to use technology, is to understand it before you get out into the field. So if you just bought a new GPS, it's a good idea to sort of test it out, make some waypoints, track yourself just around the house so you understand how to do it. And if you're going to use a phone app, there's like a million mapping apps out there now. So depending on which one you choose, do you need to download your base maps before you leave service? Do you have to buy base maps? What's going on? There's lots of different apps, and each one has different functionality. So as long as you understand it before you go, and everything that you have that you're going to need out there, you download while you still have service. Because a good rule of thumb when you're backcountry traveling is that you are not going to have cell service. So some other skills to practice are your basic bushcraft skills. So these are going to come in handy in an emergency sort of situation. And there's, like I said, it's easy to find videos on how to navigate. There is way more information than you would ever need to know about bushcraft online. There's some really keen people in the bushcraft community, but there's a lot of knowledge in there as well. The one thing I'm going to say about practicing bushcraft skills is that a park is not really the place to practice this stuff, because a lot of it does involve cutting vegetation, starting fires, stuff like that. And parks have been set aside to protect them, not so that people can go and cut down trees to build shelters to practice bushcraft. So find a place that's closer to home, or is that you are able to do that sort of thing. Like knots and fire starting, well, all this you could probably practice in your backyard or any sort of stand forest around. There's a lot of money in that picture, and a lot of it looks pretty sweet, and it's pretty tempting to fall down the gear rabbit hole. But I would say if you're starting out, it's definitely not necessary. Sort of like you have lots of time to attain all your hiking goals as you get older. You also have lots of time to throw a bunch of money down a hole to save a few ounces on your ultralight setup. So yeah, all I'm trying to say is here that you don't need the most expensive or fanciest gear to start out. I would invest in the basics and then go from there. And in my opinion, the most worthy things of investment right off the bat are your boots, your shelter, and your pack. And then from there, maybe a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag. And then you can fill the gaps. So this is, again, one of the aspects where having a good community comes in hand, because if you have some friends that you can head out with, you can sort of like sit around the camp stove in the evening and talk about gear and like check out their stove or check out their tent. Or you can swap gear, you can borrow gear from people as well. Like as you're starting out, there's going to be gaps in the gear that you own, so you can borrow from friends. And all of this experience of trying different things, it will help you inform, or will help inform your decision about what you actually do want to spend your money on going forward. Another thing, when you're looking for gear, there's tons of like used gear swaps around through different organizations, or like locally in Courtney here, we've got a whole store called Bluetooth that's really good for used gear. So I don't know, depending on where you might be watching this from, there may be stores or swaps or sorts of things because people upgrade their gear a lot and then they'll sell off their old gear. So that's a good resource to take advantage of. Okay, I graduated from 101. So let's get into Backcountry 201. So this is where you have you've nailed down your gear, you've gotten your base skills set up, and you want to start going on routes as opposed to trails, which means like routes are not maintained, trails are maintained. At least this is like BC Parks language. Backcountry 201, this is sort of where I would start thinking about like more serious overnights, where you, like in Backcountry 101, you can do overnights where you're testing your gear, like easy hikes close to home. Backcountry 201, I would say like you've tested your gear, you know the ins and outs, and you know the limits of it. That's important for this stage of backcountry rec, because as we're gonna, like a lot of what we're going to talk about here is trip planning. So as you know your gear, you want to adjust what you put in your pack for the weather. And we'll talk more about that in a slide or two. So yeah, at this stage, it's way more important to do your research and more intensive planning. And these are skills that you should be building for like the 301, where you're going way off the deep end. And at this stage, you should have a good idea of backcountry ethics as well. Yeah, I said it sounds much easier, but maybe one way. So in Strathcona, some of the backcountry 201 hikes, like a lot of these are still day hikes, but they're much more, what do you say, much more high consequence day hikes. So hikes like Phillips Ridge, Kings Peak, Bedwell or Cream Lakes, if you're heading in there overnight, Albert Edwards, and then Comox Glacier and Century Sam. So that picture there, that's my boss, Andy Smith. He's on top of Kings Peak, and you're looking at Elkhorn Peak. So that's the top of Elkhorn Peak. I'd say that's a 301. That'll be the next section. So yeah, when you're heading out into in an area that's a little bit further off the beaten track and you've never been there before, I have no idea why it's called beta, but they call trip information about a certain area, they call it beta. So this is where you want to do your research. So before you head out on this trip, you want to be like spending a bit of time behind your computer or on your phone or whatever, getting trip reports. And what you want to look for in a good trip report is that it's recent, that it's detailed, and photos are worth 1,000 words. Isn't that the saying? So that's what you want to look for to give yourself the best informed decision on what you might be getting yourself into before you ever start packing your bag. Because what you think you're going to get yourself into will affect, hopefully, who you decide to go with, what sort of gear you take, timings, everything. So where to get good data? I'm not the biggest fan of Facebook, but unfortunately, that is where a lot of the quality information is shared these days, at least in my area. So for Vancouver Island, there's 2 groups that I have posted on this page. Vancouver Island Backcountry Hiking and Vancouver Island Climbing and Mountaineering, if you're getting into the more 301 stuff. Those groups are filled with super knowledgeable people, and for the most part, they're super friendly and helpful. It's weird sometimes in backcountry groups, people can get a little ornery if they think people are being asking the wrong questions or whatever, but I don't find that from the Vancouver Island ones. I find it people are pretty friendly. Another good resource for info are the local hiking clubs. So locally here, we have the Comox District Mountaineering Club. There's the Alpine Club of Canada, the Vancouver Island section, that's based out of Victoria. And Island Mountain Ramblers is based out of Nanaimo. All 3 of those groups will do trips all over the island, and all 3 of those groups are filled with super knowledgeable people that want to share all their knowledge with you. If you are serious about like quickly developing your mountain travel or alpine travel skills, a club is a really good way to go. Yeah, friends that are into hiking probably want to talk about hiking. Blogs. Trail Peak is a blog that has, it's got a lot of good info, I find, but it seems like it's starting to get a little dated, and especially on the island when there's so much logging everywhere. Access is one of the things that can change rapidly. So like the Trail Peak access descriptions might be a little iffy. And then books. So there's a series of books by Phil Stone, Exploring Strathcona Island Turns of Tours. I don't remember I think there's a few others, but he's actually in those Facebook groups that I mentioned. So if you're asking questions in there, you might get him, who is the guru, I would say, well, one of the gurus on the island. Another really important thing to look at for trip planning is weather reports. I'm not an expert at this, I don't pretend to be. I use Mountain Forecast, which I find pretty good for the amount of detail that I need. But there are, like as you learn more and talk to more people, I'm starting to learn more about this now. There's you can get super technical with it. Like one of the guys on Search and Rescue, he looks at like, he's a guide, and he looks at like whether that military air pilots will use, and apparently that's really accurate, but I've tried to read it and it looks like hieroglyphics. So for what I need, things like Mountain Forecast or Windy, which is what I have a picture of up here, are pretty good. So what Mountain Forecast is that you can go on there and it basically, I don't know where they get their algorithm from, but you can basically pick peaks, and it's specific to the peak. So the link I have there is Mount Albert Edwards, and you can see it says Mount Albert Edwards forecast /2093. That's the elevation. So you can actually on most mountains go from that, like 2,093 meters is the peak of Albert Edwards. So you can get the weather at the peak, and you can get the weather like at 1,000 meters and so forth, so on and so forth. So you can actually see, that would help you, like if it's going to be a snowstorm up at the top, but the forecast is looking a little better lower down. Hopefully it's accurate, and you could sort of adjust your plans that way. Windy is good because it's visually pleasing, and I think it's actually pretty accurate, but Spot WX is just something I found as I was researching this. So there's tons of different resources you can use. The important thing is to check a few different ones, try and get as complete of a picture as you can for the area that you're heading into, and then sort of keep track of what you have used and how that, like how accurate it was when you're out in the field. So based on, like, I went to Mountain Forecast and this is what it said, is that what I saw in the field? And then if not, good to know. You can try something else in the future. Another good thing, and this is more, again, a little bit, my park ranger side is thinking, this is more about sort of wilderness ethics, but it's really important to know the rules and regulations of a place before you go in there. Yeah, I'll talk more about that at the last slide, but especially if you're in a park, there's probably going to be rules and regulations. So for Strathcona, for example, dogs, fires, and camping are all issues. So for some areas of Strathcona, dogs are not allowed to be, dogs are not allowed to be off leash, like the Paradise Meadows area, and that's an area that we watch pretty closely for that. Other areas, like if you're way in the backcountry, we would still prefer you not to have your dog running around off leash there, but it's not patrolled as such. Fires are banned everywhere in Strathcona backcountry. The only place you're allowed is a front country fire ring, and then camping in certain areas of the park. You're only allowed to camp in designated spots. And so each one of these rules are, there is a wilderness ethics also a safety aspect to it. So the dogs thing, if your dog is running around off leash, you don't know where it is. It could be pooping in the water source. And it could also, and like in Paradise Meadows, all the water sources are so interconnected and there's not a lot of flow. And that's what people are drinking from. Also, dogs can attract predatory animals like a bear, or also if it's a really busy place, they could be bowling over children. So it's not a danger to you, but it's a danger to that kid that your dog just ran into. Fires, that's pretty obvious. You don't want to start a wildfire. So that's the safety side, but then also the ethical side of it is that when you have a fire in the backcountry, it leaves a scar on the ground that doesn't go away for years. So it's sort of, people go to see the beauty of the nature, not to see some old fire scar with a half-burned tin of beans in it or something. And then camping, the safety side of that is that, well, the spots that we designate as campsites are chosen because they're safe and they make sense. And also, like, if Paul Berry, who you'll hear talk just after me, is starting a search, and he knows that you left from the Paradise Meadows trailhead, maybe some of the first places they're going to go are the different campsites to see if there's if your tent is there or any of your gear. And then the ethical side of it is that if you're just camping randomly in a place where there's high traffic, it's not going to be long before we start to see those impacts on the natural values. So Backcountry 301, I am definitely not qualified to teach this. So these are the advanced route finding or mountaineering routes. So you can see that picture there, that's Colonel Foster, which is, I think, considered the most technically difficult climb on the island. And I certainly don't think I could do that route that's highlighted there in red. But there are a few in Strathcona. The Golden Hind, it's not a super technical climb, but it's so remote that I would put it on this list. Colonel Foster, Elkhorn, all the climbing routes. And then there's all these super intricate ridge routes that people link together, and that are always pretty fun to see. So these are some of the things that maybe you got to go through Backcountry 101 and 201, and maybe one day these are some of the goals that you'll be starting to set for yourself. A quick note on what not to do. So one of the things I had in the back of my mind as I was planning this talk was some of the trends that we've been seeing in parks lately. I'm sure you may have heard of Joffrey Lakes, how that exploded, and we were seeing it in Strathcona as well. Some of the more popular hikes that get explode on social media, we start to see, as I try and be diplomatic, like when a hike becomes super popular, you start to see like silly behavior there. So I'm definitely not trying to pick on women or anything. These are just the two examples I found. But the Explore Vancouver Island one there, these girls, I didn't watch the video, but I'm sure it was a great time. But you probably don't want to be mixing alcohol and hiking because, yeah, it just amps up the risk factors. And then the one on the right there, this is a Instagram influencer. I don't remember her handle, but like if you were really inexperienced with backcountry travel and you see this picture, like she is standing in an alpine environment. She's got good boots on, but that's about it. She has no backpack, no layers, and I'm sure she has all the stuff, but it's just not in the photo. So it's important to remember that a lot of the things you see on social media are contrived. They're not super realistic. So social media is a wonderful, wonderful tool for setting goals for yourself and like finding out about hikes. But then from that, you take that hike, put it on your list, and then you go and do some of the research that we talked about in the Backcountry 201 section. It's super important to do that. Otherwise, you could get yourself into dangerous situations, and you can be impacting the natural habitats. So I hope that this has given you, I hope I haven't come down too hard. I do want to get people excited to hike, and I think there's a ton of stuff to explore. I just think that people need to do it safely and ethically, and I think that's really important. So I'm super glad that everyone tuned into this. So thank you very much.
Awesome, thanks, Jamie. So yeah, we've got a couple questions from our audience. The first one that came in is from Louise, and they're wondering how far has the snow receded in the Paradise Meadows area? Lake Helen, Mackenzie, Crow2, and Quai. She says, thanks for all that you do.
Yeah, good question, Louise. That is that's a wonderful question, because I know at this time of year, you may not realize, I think a lot of people don't realize how long the snow sticks around in the Paradise Meadows area. This year in particular, it's been a lot later. The last time, I haven't been up there since last week, but we had our park operator up there just on Sunday. So it has not receded very far. I would say it's still snowshoe. It's still sort of snowshoe. You still want snowshoes. Sorry, that's what I'm trying to say. I think the sort of like the most like the Paradise Loop, which is that boardwalk around the Meadows, I think that's free. And I think it's like, what did she say? I think it's about 30% free on the Helen Mackenzie Loop. So there is still quite a bit of snow. And then as you get past sort of Battleship Helen Mackenzie Loop, you're going to see fairly strong snow coverage still. And the thing to watch out for right now is sort of like on anywhere over water courses, and then on the edge of trails and boardwalks, the snow melts like under, but you might be walking on like this much snow, but you're 4 feet up in the air. So it creates all these like little voids that you kind of want to watch out for. You can usually tell where they are if you're paying attention. But yeah, that's why snowshoes are good, because otherwise you can sort of post hole or fall into one of those little voids. So yeah, it's not I think we're kind of past the worst of it, but early season, as the snow's melting, is sort of the most treacherous time up there.
Excellent. Next one, Lindsay would just like to know, where was the place in Courtney for used gear again?
That's the Blue Toque, which is right by the 5th Street Bridge. It's right beside Mountain City Cycle. And I should do a plug. They actually have a thing right now. So it's consignment sales. So if you have any old gear that you want to get rid of, you can take it there and they'll sell it for you. But also right now, Search and Rescue is doing a big fundraiser to try and get a building. And so they have an account right now at Blue Toque. If you have gear that you want to send or sell through them, you can donate the proceeds to the Search and Rescue fundraiser, or you can, if you don't want to do that, you can just get the money that they make from it.
Awesome. This is a question from Jamie. Jamie says, first of all, thank you for bringing your knowledge to share with us. Second, I'm curious what BC Parks is doing to rehab or maintain the trails that are potentially seeing more traffic and increases in popularity.
Yeah, good question, Jamie. Yeah, so we sort of, it depends on the area. Most of the trail, like people walking on a trail, doesn't really impact the environment. So like that's why I think it's very important that people are sitting in on this sort of talk, because the carrying capacity of the trails and facilities that we have is pretty high if people are sort of staying on them. The impacts really start to show though when people don't know how to behave in the backcountry. So that's that whole wilderness ethics thing, and that is something that we saw a lot of last year, like people camping sort of wherever, people having fires in the backcountry, people not knowing how to poop in the woods. That made for a lot of awkward conversations. So one of the main tools that we use is enforcement. So if we see somebody camping in the wrong place, we can evict them from the park or give them a warning, or if it warrants it, we can write a ticket for it. But I mean, there's not a ton of us rangers, and I don't know if I did say it, but Strathcona's 250,000 hectares, and it's not even our only park. So that's a pretty difficult tool to use. There are some times when we can, like areas are damaged, so we can sort of rehabilitate them and create a new trail. But yeah, it's a problem, and it sort of pops up here, and then we can deal with it there, and then it pops up here, and we can deal with it there. So like another thing that you may see on the island, I would say for sure in like the Paradise Meadows area or Elk River Trail, some of the really popular places. I don't think there's anything official at all, but I would foresee one of the systems like they have in Joffrey Lakes and the Squamish area with a day use pass. So it's a free pass, but you have to have it, and so that just sort of limits the number of users, because at a certain point there's too many people impacting the trails than we can keep up with. And I know there are some kinks that have to be worked out with for the daily, the free daily pass, but I think that may be a good option to explore. And the idea with that is not to sort of keep people out of the park. It's more to sort of spread the impact. So I think it would be for a certain trail. So like if you're camping at Buttle Lake and the trail passes for Elk River Trail, which is probably the most popular trail out there, are taken for the day, maybe you're going to go hike Crest Mountain, or maybe you'll hike Kings Peak or something like that.
Awesome. And this is a good question that we have. In your years as a ranger, have the types of users changed, and who are they? Like, are they new to the outdoors, more experienced? families, hikers?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's tough to say. I would love to talk to every single person that I see, and but I don't often have time or don't get that deep, other than, hey, how's it going? Great, you too. But I think definitely last year with COVID and everyone stuck at home, we did see a bit of a change in usership. And I don't know, it's tough to say. Like, I don't know if it's more people out there noticing every little thing, or more people behaving poorly in the backcountry. But yeah, I think definitely last year there was a lot more people new to it for sure. And whether that was the cause of some of the complaints that we heard or not, I don't know. You would hope that wasn't the only thing, or like you would hope that it's not the case where there's way more people up there doing the wrong thing, because in theory, most of the new people out there last year were people from relatively close by. So you can't blame it on the tourists at that point. But yeah, I do think there is a trend of newer people coming out. And I'm fairly new to the island. Like, I've lived here for 5-6 years. So I don't know what it was like before, but I get the sense that like a decade ago, it was very quiet in the park. And since I've been here, I think like specifically Comox Valley, which is like one of the gateways to Strathcona, we're seeing a big increase in population here as well. So I think people new to the outdoors and people new to this area for sure. Yeah. As far as province wide, I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Excellent. And this will be our last question from Joanna. What is the best source for up-to-date trail conditions for Paradise Meadows in the park?
That's the Strathcona Park website, and I'll see if I can actually. I don't have it memorized. It's on the BC Parks website. I'm just going to it right now so I can tell you exactly how to get there. And I will say right off the bat, my bad, I forgot to send in a trail update last week. But if you go to the Strathcona Park website and you go know before you go, there's all those different headings you can click. If you go know before you go, there's the current trail conditions there. So as I said, I forgot to send one in last week, so they're current as of May 28th. But I will be putting a new one on Thursday. I try and do them every Thursday. I missed last week. I apologize, everybody. But yeah, they should be there every Thursday. And also as a note for that, if you click on that, like on the current trail conditions, I'm pretty sure, yep, it's got my work email in there. So if you're out on the trails and you like want to send me a quick note about where you were and what it was like, that's super helpful, because especially like this time of year when snow is constantly receding and it's important for us to be on top of that, but there's 2 of us for the whole park, it's a little tough. So with more eyes on it, it's super helpful. But yeah, that's and you can, like, every spring usually people will just email me questions at that email.
Excellent.
So there's there, and also, sorry, there's those 2 Facebook groups I put in the presentation. So on Facebook, those are Vancouver Island backcountry hiking for like all the hikes, and then if you're more adventurous looking at like get into the mountaineering side, there's Vancouver Island climbing and mountaineering. Those are also really good sort of resources.
Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Jamie. That was great. And to have that personal touch, Jamie, that you can say, send me an email and I'll share some more information with you. How much better could that be to have that connection here tonight and share your insights specifically with the 101, 102, 201, 301. That was broke down really well. And I think that helped some of our audience here tonight to tap into that a little bit more. And to have that park specific information from you is really great. So we share our information weekly, but this is specific to the park with you here. So thanks again. It was really great information, and I appreciated your time tonight. Hopefully you can stick around. While I was listening, Jamie, Rob, our fellow park ranger, was saying, Ranger Jamie's on, Ranger Jamie's on. Hopefully he was going to queue in. He just got into Squamish and he said he was going to join in. So hopefully, Rob, you're with us now. Before we move on to our next special guest, I just wanted to say, unfortunately, our third special guest from Cowichan Tribes was unable to join us tonight. So I apologize for that. And if you wanted to join us this Thursday for Northern BC's perspective, we do have an Indigenous leader joining us this Thursday. But before I pass it over to our next guest from Comox SAR, Paul Berry, I just wanted to let you know that in British Columbia, we have 79 search and rescue groups, and there's 2,500 volunteers who volunteer to support their community, help those in need, and very dedicated, highly skilled, highly trained, unpaid professionals that respond to over 1,700 search and rescue calls every year in British Columbia. That annual call volume was one of the reasons why AdventureSmart started here in British Columbia 17 years ago by the BC Search and Rescue Association. And then based on our provincial success in the first 5 years, AdventureSmart went national, and it is in every province and territory since 2009. We're fortunate here, we're supported by the BC Search and Rescue Association. We have a unique model. Natasha and I do this as our full-time job with our team, and everywhere else in the country it's done on a volunteer basis. But we also have volunteers who come and join our crew as well. We have over 500 that we've trained in BC who are AdventureSmart presenters, educators in the province of BC. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Paul. Paul Berry has been an educator for over 35 years, currently in his final year as Director of Instruction for the Comox Valley School District. He's a 23-year member of Comox Valley Search and Rescue and is passionate about search and rescue. He's had qualifications in advanced swiftwater rescue, advanced wilderness first aid, avalanche response, and tracking. He's one of a dozen level 2 search managers in the province and teaches search management, team leadership, lost person behavior, and incident command. He's also a contributing author to the Provincial Ground Search and Rescue, team leader, and search management, and also is involved with the National Search and Rescue Standards. Paul, it's great to have you join us. I can't wait to hear what you have to share. Over to you. Thanks.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to reduce this. Are you able to see the slides? There we go.
Yes, we are, Paul. Thanks very much.
Okay. I'd like to start by saying that Comox Search Rescue respectfully acknowledges that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Now,
Paul, I'm not able to hear you unless anybody else can.
No, I was just coming on to say we've lost Paul's audio momentarily here.
okay. Have you got me back?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. Let's get the technical issues out of the way right at the beginning. It's my intention this evening to cover these topics, to talk briefly about search and rescue in the province or on Vancouver Island, to speak specifically about our team, Comox Valley Search and Rescue, who we are and what we do, to share a little bit more about our area of operations, which Jamie already spoke to you about, and to share some lessons that I've learned over the past number of years, lessons that some lessons were hard learned from SAR events that hopefully will keep you safe as you venture out in the future. So no one ever expects that something is going to go wrong when they go out on a hike. But as we've seen time and time again in this province, things can change. Weather, poor judgment, unexpected injuries can cause the need for a SAR response. Across Canada, there are over 10,000 search and rescue incidents. Sandra mentioned 1,700 in this province, and that number has been increasing over the last number of years. And the vast majority of those 10,000 SAR events take place in BC. BC accounts for more search and rescue incidents than all other provinces combined, and that's probably because of the nature of the terrain, as you see in this image. Search and rescue on Vancouver Island is the responsibility of 12 teams, and we have 3 teams in the Victoria area, and then teams all the way up the island to Campbell River. Campbell River is responsible for everything north of themselves as well. And then we have 2 teams on the islands as well, Salt Spring Island, and on the mainland, Paul River, which are also part of the Vancouver Island SAR community. All SAR teams operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And we respond to callouts or taskings from Emergency Management BC and the Emergency Coordination Center in Victoria. We assist or tasked by a number of different agencies, but most predominantly the RCMP and BC Ambulance. Comox Valley Search and Rescue, this is our playground. This is Strathcona Park. Our team is comprised of 50 very highly skilled unpaid professionals, and this team alone commits up to 20,000 person hours of service to the community each year, that in operations, in training, and all of the things that need to be done to support the continued operation of our team. We come from a variety of backgrounds, those of us who are still working and those who are retired, young and old. We are a very strong team, committed to each other, committed to professionalism, and committed to saving lives. And we are very much a family that looks after each other on our team, and we're very much an extended family across Vancouver Island, because when events grow large, we look to our neighbors to the north in Campbell River, or any of our neighbors to the south or to the east of us, to come and join us, because many searches involve mutual aid, which is many teams coming together to do the work that needs to be done. The services we provide are varied. Search and rescue management, wilderness book search, as well as urban and rural search. We're looking for lost children, people who walked away. We're seeing an increasing trend in those with despondency and dementia. Injured hikers, lost hikers are not the only work that we do. And here we see Brad with one of our rescue subjects, a rather enthusiastic hound who decided that going over that cliff was something he needed to do at that moment. Ground search rescue is the domain of the police. A search is a missing persons investigation. And here we see Chris Smith and one of his 2 search dogs. They were involved in the search for Sylvia Apps in the Castle Craig area. This is in July of 2014. And this would be one of the large-scale searches that I just spoke of. Here we had 22 teams from not only the island, but from the lower mainland, involved in a search, a wide-ranging search throughout the Castle Craig, Mount Frink area for Sylvia, 10 operational periods. Even though we were able to locate virtually every item that Sylvia took with her into the backcountry, we were not able to locate Sylvia. This is an example of a recent search last June and July for Lawrence Phillipson. This is in the northern part of Strathcona Park. in the Mount Philburg area. And you can see some pretty significant terrain along the spine of Vancouver Island. The image on the left shows some of the search tracks stretching through a whole series of peaks along ridge lines, as Jamie mentioned. This route, a very infrequently traveled route by backcountry enthusiasts here on the island. In addition to ground search, we maintain swiftwater and inland water rescue, and here's one of our teams practicing medical evacuation in swiftwater. We are involved in ice rescue. This is a really interesting image. If you pay close attention to the chair, this was initially reported as a missing fisherman. There's a chair with his coat, and floating in the water just in front of the chair was a fishing rod. The team did respond, did search, and fortunately for this individual, he was able to get himself out of the water and had traveled home once and reported in later on. So all good in that situation. We maintain a high angle rope rescue team, and here they are traveling, participating and practicing at the Devil's Ladder at Comox Lake on a beautiful evening. And even the hounds get involved. We have significant avalanche terrain here on Vancouver Island, and many people who venture out in the wintertime are not aware of that. We think about avalanche terrain in the Coast Ranges and in the Rockies, but Vancouver Island too possesses significant terrain that is prone to avalanche, and because of the heavy, wet nature of our snow, can be catastrophic avalanche. So we maintain, as many of the teams do on the island, organized avalanche response teams. Tracking is another skill set that our team and many of the teams engage in, and here we see brand new recruits learning to identify the key features in tracks. We have 4 currently certified canine search teams. Frank and Chris and are certified, and we have 1 additional member who is currently about to engage in her final certification, and that's Jenna. Medical rescue and evacuation is an area that has always been an element of what we do, but it has we've seen a significant increase in the number of medical evacuations that we are involved in the backcountry and in far more technical terrain than we have in the past. And the image on the right, a significant increase in the number of mountain bikers. There are in our area of operations some very significant destination mountain biking areas, and every weekend, every night, those trails are abundantly ridden by enthusiastic herds of mountain bikers. As you noticed from the images from Jamie, as he talked about his hiking 201 and 301, there is some significantly technical terrain along the spine of Vancouver Island, including glacier travel. And our teams as well consistently train in mountain rescue and mountain travel techniques so that we can access environments where individuals may have been hiking and found themselves in difficulty. In addition, we work alongside Campbell River Search and Rescue and have a regional helicopter hoist rescue team. We have partnered with Ascent Helicopters out of Parksville and have a number of machines that we operate. I think there are 16 members between the 2 teams who respond into highly technical terrain to be able to provide medical evacuation or the insertion of team members into terrain that is going to be difficult to access on foot. Helicopters are a necessary mode of travel for our teams. We have a backcountry pre-plan, and when we have to hike more than an hour or more, we activate that pre-plan so that we can get our teams into more remote, less accessible areas as quickly as we can, or as deep as we can before nightfall, so that we can access those who need our support. I mentioned earlier on that there is an increased demand for SAR services. You can see that in each of these areas, ground search, swiftwater, medical rescue, hover, exit, Class D fixed line, which is the hoist, and even in our flat water rescues, we have seen increases over the last number of years. This graph shows from 2007 to 2021. Last year alone, there was an increase of actually more than 25% for teams, particularly in the Southwest, but also on Vancouver Island and other areas within the province. So these teams of unpaid professionals are being asked to do more and more and more each year. Jamie talked about Strathcona Park, but I wanted to talk about other parks that are a little bit closer to home and also more accessible for those people who are just beginning to want to venture out and become more active in a wilderness environment. Seal Bay is just an example here in the Comox Valley of many of the regional parks that exist throughout Vancouver Island that are accessible to the public and provide an opportunity for anyone who wishes to begin to develop some of those good wilderness travel skills, navigation skills. They can do so much closer to home and in less technical, safer environments than venturing into more technical terrain, such as was shown in Strathcona Park. So I want to really encourage people who want to begin to explore more wilderness areas to look to the regional parks that you have within your own communities. Many of them are well mapped and well marked and provide you an opportunity to begin small, close to home. Jamie talked about Strathcona Park, but you can see that this park, which is the oldest park on Vancouver Island, has a significantly diverse terrain, from the relatively serene Paradise Meadows, which has a number of trails on a boardwalk which are easily accessible, even accessible to handicapped, with special chairs that are available at the visitor center. Provides an opportunity for those who are less able to get out and to enjoy this environment, to the types of environments that you see in the images on the right. Jamie talked about the Golden Hind. We see Mount Arrowsmith as well. Very significant terrain here in Strathcona Park, and Comox Valley is one of the more significant gateways to many of these areas. So I want to transition now to pick up on some of the AdventureSmart themes. AdventureSmart talks about the 3 T's: trip planning, training, and the essentials. So here's some lessons that I've learned over the 23 years that I've been involved with search and rescue. These are areas that people don't spend the time or develop the skills or access the resources that they might need to really adhere to these 3 T's. So the first ones I want to talk about is trip planning. Oftentimes, people decide that they're going to go for a hike, and they have seen on social media or they heard from a friend that the trail from A to B is a great place to go and venture out that day. And so they do, without having left information with a reliable source about where they're going, where they're going to park their car, what trip they intend to take, and what time they intend to be back. I want to really encourage you to explore the AdventureSmart site, and I'm sure Sandra is going to reinforce this, to take a look at what do you need to do to leave a trip plan with a reliable source, so that if something goes wrong while you are venturing out, even into a regional park, that someone knows where you are and when to call for help if you don't return. Another area that I've certainly begun to appreciate over time is that people fail to have done their homework and to appreciate the impact of significant terrain, particularly steep terrain, on the time it's going to take for them to get from point A to point B. It's pretty sexy to want to go and to bag a peak in a day and observe the vistas from on top of a mountain. But getting there is often a challenge. And if you're not prepared and have not done your homework, that what looks like a very simple, short duration hike can take much longer. And you end up finding that you're arriving as it's becoming dark and have now overstayed your welcome and are going to find that you're not going to be able to get back home when you'd hoped to. Weather is another area in terms of trip planning. Jamie talked about a number of the apps that are available to review weather. Looking at past weather and what its impact might have been on snow conditions, on the terrain, down trees across trails, those sorts of things. Has it been significantly windy, heavily? Has it rained heavily in advance of your trip? Because that's going to impact where you can travel, the quality of the trail, how slippery the boardwalks might be, even on a simple trail. And what is the weather going to do? If you're looking ahead at projected weather that says it's going to become significantly windy and rainy and potentially cooling temperatures, that's not the time to set out on trail into alpine terrain. And that's one of the mistakes that we see far too often from a search and rescue perspective. People head out on what they think will be a simple day trip, only to find the fog and rain move in, and they are now disoriented, lost in the fog, and unable to orient themselves and to travel any further. The other piece is failing to appreciate the impact of the need for a rescue. It's not as simple as being able to dial 911 and have an ambulance attend to you. If you have traveled 3 or 4 hours back into the backcountry, you have to realize that it's going to take your rescuers an equal amount or maybe greater time to get to you, because the amount of equipment, stretcher and so on that they may need to take. And if you are stuck where you are or injured where you are, and you have rain and fog and darkness, that's going to impact the speed at which we can come and get to you. So I use the phrase, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Remember that when you're venturing into the backcountry, you're not in your neighborhood anymore, and you need to be appreciative of the changes of the environment you have now traveled into to help keep you safe. In terms of training, going into the backcountry, going up a trail like Albert Edward requires you to be physically prepared. And so take those small day trips, prepare yourself physically, emotionally, so that you can successfully travel to where you want to travel with. Travel with those who have equal levels of fitness. Far too often we have seen groups that head off where you have a number of very fit hard chargers who travel ahead, and they wear out those who are behind. And as a result, they end up having to be delayed, and they too end up being caught because of weather or darkness, or injured because they pushed themselves beyond the level of training that or level of fitness that they have at that time. Navigation and inadequate training with navigation is probably the single biggest issue that we see that impacts those that we provide service to. It's one thing to follow a trail in a regional nature park. It's something entirely different to move into the higher alpine and be route finding where there are no signs, where there are no trail markers, and it's now your responsibility to be able to use your map and your compass and GPS to get from point A to point B and back safely. These are skill sets that can be learned, but they need to be learned in a safe environment. As Jamie stressed in his presentation, to gradually grow those skills so that you can be successful in more diverse and technical terrain further into the backcountry. Inadequate wilderness survival training, another area. People often just take a few things with them, don't appreciate the need for keeping themselves warm and dry as weather conditions change, and so find themselves hypothermic very quickly and able to proceed. So, if you can look to a local guide outfit, even a local search and rescue team that might be providing some of this training, yes, you can look to YouTube and other resources. They can provide resources, but you need to find some of that time to have hands-on, face-to-face. Learning those skills when you're in an emergency is not the time to learn them. And then know what to do if you are lost. From the very earliest ages in our schools, we teach a program called Lost in the Woods. And we teach kids to know, or to hug a tree, I should say, that if they're lost, to stay put. It's much easier to find someone who's stationary than someone who's lost and continues to wander around and to get themselves more lost. In addition, with these three Gs, we talk about the essentials, and navigation and communication devices are essentials. Many people today rely on their smartphones, and I'm going to show you a slide in a moment on just how many areas within a park like Strathcona do not have cell coverage. So, well, a cell phone and the multitude of apps that now exist for navigation are amazing tools. You need to be well practiced with them, and you need to know, as Jamie said, whether or not you need to download your maps while you have cell coverage. So find some tools that work along beside someone who is skilled with them, practice with them so that you can use them well when you venture out. You'll see in a moment that cell coverage is something that is not universal. And so taking with you other devices that will allow you to communicate when cell coverage does not exist. And there are a number of these. The Garmin products and the Spot devices all allow you now to communicate via text through satellite link to someone that you've pre-planned with, or to an emergency agency. You do need to know, however, that if you have a Spot device or a Garmin like an InReach and send out an emergency call, it again is not like dialing 911. Your call will go to the International Emergency Response Coordination Center. I believe it's in Texas, and they will then contact the nearest local emergency agency. So in this case, it would be the RCMP if you were lost in the backcountry here and signaled that you were in need of support. If you're 4 or 5 hours into the backcountry when you push that help button, you're going to have to wait for at least that amount of time for a ground response, or particularly if the weather's bad and it takes time to marshal resources. Volunteers are at home or at work, or if we have to contact the military to assist, they too require time to get to their machines and fly to your location. So it's important to be well prepared for an emergency, to look after yourself until the rescuers can reach you. So a number of the things that we see that people head off, they'll hike into the park, set up their tent at one of the campsites within the park. Circlet Lake is a good example. And then they will head up to Albert Edward or one of the other peaks, and they will take virtually nothing with them. Every time you venture out, have a day pack, have some clothing. Conditions change rapidly in the Alpine. On the island, it rains. Have appropriate footwear for the conditions that you're in. Flip-flops and bogs are not appropriate for the Alpine. have a communications device, a signaling device, whether it's a cell phone, an inReach, the mirror on your compass, a flashlight. All those devices come in handy for rescuers to be able to locate you, particularly in the dark. This is a map of Strathcona Park, the Albert Edward area. You can see Circuit Lake and Moat Lake. The bluish purpley shading that you see are areas where there is cell coverage. So you can see the higher ridge lines. You would be able to use your cell phone to call for help. But as soon as you descend down into any of those valleys, in any of those drainages, you no longer have access to that tool that you rely on when you're within city limits. And so here's a really good example of why it's important that you carry an alternate communications device in the event of emergency. Jamie talked a little bit about apps, and there are a variety, and I'm not going to sell one over another. But depending on whatever the backcountry pursuit is that you're involved in, there are different tools and different apps that are better suited to the type of activity you're involved in. Find out what the apps are that are most reliable and most used, and work with someone to learn them and use them well, but have the backup. Yes, many of the devices that work on your cell phones when you have coverage are great tools, but when you drop that phone and it's broken, you need to have the backup of a good map and compass, and those are skills that you need to learn, and they need to be learned hands-on. And here we see some new recruits from our local SAR team developing those skills. All of our members must be able to navigate by map and by compass thoroughly and skillfully before we set them loose with any of the electronic devices that we also utilize. Some of the other essentials that we see that people often do not carry with them, and that would make their rescue and their location and their time in the backcountry awaiting rescue much more comfortable. Having some source of light, either a headlamp or a flashlight, makes locating you either from the air or by ground teams much easier. In addition, it provides you some safety on the ground, and as well as a psychological blanket. Having light when it's dark all around you just makes you feel that much better. Having something to be able to start a fire with, and the skills to be able to build a fire in a rainforest environment such as we operate in is important. That fire is going to keep you warm, help get you dry if you're wet, and ward off hypothermia. In addition, it's going to be another source of illumination and signal for your rescuers to be able to find you. Oftentimes we see that as people have left their day camp and ventured into the Alpine, they haven't taken enough food or water to sustain themselves, given the complexity and the strenuousness of their endeavors. And having enough water is absolutely essential. When you get into the Alpine, particularly in the later months of summer, you're not going to find adequate supplies of water. And even if you are, the water that you find may not be suitable to drink. If you're injured, you have to look after your needs first, long before rescuers get to you. So taking a first aid kit, oftentimes we see people traveling without those. And think about what season you're traveling in. Seasonal needs, many times in the summer, when we come upon individuals who have called for our assistance, they're badly burned because they've been high in the Alpine in the snow and have not had sunscreen, have not had a hat, have not had sunglasses. I just wanted to be able to share with you some of what I've learned, some lessons that we hope will help keep you safe as you venture into the myriad of beautiful spots that we have here on Vancouver Island, and to share a little bit about the expertise and skill sets of the 12 search and rescue teams that we have here on Vancouver Island. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your presentation. We have a great question from Kathy. I think you covered this a little bit, but if I use my InReach SOS button during an emergency and it sends a message to Garmin, how long before the message gets to the local SAR organization to initiate a rescue?
I can say that my experience has been that they're very efficient at contacting the local agency. So in most cases, it's the RCMP. But it depends on how accurate the individual has been in registering their device and providing good location information.
Awesome. Great question we have here from Marcus. In front country / backcountry hiking or camping, is a pocket knife multi-tool a must?
Yeah, I certainly don't go anywhere without one. They can, multi-tools in particular, can provide a lot of different resources quickly at hand. Anything from building a shelter to cutting some shoelaces to tie a tourniquet. Absolutely.
Great. And then we've got another question here. What is the most common search and rescue reason in your region? Like, is it a twisted ankle, they don't have light, they aren't capable in the terrain that they're in?
It ranges, but I would say that we have a trend in particular areas of the park to see individuals who don't follow the rules around checking the weather, and they venture into terrain that alpine terrain that can change very quickly when the weather changes, and visibility, they lose visibility and end up becoming disoriented. They're usually also not well prepared. They plan on a day hike, quick in and out, and as soon as the fog and rain comes in, now they're wet and cold and lost. I would say that's probably the biggest cause for SAR in the last number of years.
Excellent. And this is a great question as well. How many hours do SAR volunteers as members in training put in to become a full member?
That is a good question. There is a basic ground search and rescue curriculum that all members engage in. Different teams choose to present that curriculum in different ways. It requires about 75 to 80 hours of classroom instruction, in addition to the practical work that needs to be done. And then for our team, all of our volunteers are required to commit to about 200 hours of additional training over the course of the year, training and operations over the course of the year to maintain their certifications.
Awesome. This is actually a great question from our audience member, Sandra. And I think more SAR groups want to address this. Locally, has the What 3 Words app been getting more uptake? Or are you still working with exact GPS, lat, and long points?
We use both. I think here locally, it's more with the exact GPS points.
Great. Yeah. That's usually what we hear from most SAR groups, but it is a good question to bring up, as the public does ask about What 3 Words a lot, and there has been a lot of chatter about it. But yeah, that's mostly the answer that we hear from the SAR groups, is that they like to stick with the exact GPS and lat and long points.
Yeah, and certainly if we are responding and looking to assist someone with error, we want the most accurate information that we can receive.
Perfect. Well,
I guess one of the other pieces that sort of relates to that is that people really need to know what format their phone may be sending GPS coordinates in, and oftentimes we see a whole variety. And the other piece is that when they venture out, They may not have been using their location devices, or may not have location services active on their phone. And so when they actually do call for help and we try to locate them, because most of the SAR teams will use a locate app, send them a message and have them send us back. If their location services are not on, we will not get an accurate fix on them.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we don't have any more questions this evening, so I just want to say thank you, Paul, from the tech side here. And Sam's going to come on and just sign off for us, and then I will be ending the webinar.
Thank you, Paul. That was insightful. It was good. I appreciate you adding our 3 T's in there and talking about what we normally do as well, which you're well versed in. And a few of us can eat, breathe, and sleep those messages. And that's what we're trying to help hikers specifically as we kick off summer. It is the highest user group that does result in search and rescue. And so we're trying to kick off your summer safely so that it can be an AdventureSmart one. And hopefully tonight helped you. I know I always make notes and learn a few things from our special guests every time we do these. Last week we did 2, today is our 3rd, and we've got our last one on Thursday. So if you want to come back and learn a little bit more about Northern BC, we will have Prince George Search and Rescue volunteer joining us, Dave Merritt. We'll also have the CEO from Eat Wild, Dylan Ayers, who's also BC Park Ranger, but he's wearing his Eat Wild hat that night. He got great stories. He's a great storyteller. That should be fun. And Anthony Moore, who's with Niska Lissim's government, and he'll be our Indigenous leader joining us on Thursday. Just a few points to share with you before I sign off, and thank you. The 3 main reasons that we have search and rescue calls in British Columbia, this is based on data-driven insights from all of the administrative work that the SAR managers enter every SAR task into the system. We know that the 3 primary causes for search and rescue are subjects are getting injured, subjects are getting lost and disoriented, and subjects are exceeding their abilities. So if you could think of those 3 things, and how would you mitigate that? How would you reduce the risks? How would you mitigate those 3? So injury, lost and disoriented, and exceeding abilities. Think about how you could make that not happen. Hopefully training comes into play, first aid, understanding your limits. So when we deliver our Survive Outside program, we jump into that as well. And last but not least, there's no charge for search and rescue. If you need help, phone as soon as possible. The number is 911 and ask for police or RCMP. You will not be charged for that call, and there's no insurance required. So from all of us here at BC AdventureSmart, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you have a lovely evening and have an excellent summer. And we really appreciate your support. Take care. Good night.